Welcome back to Choices Were Made. I'm Miranda.
And I'm Evelyn.
Last week, we shared our journeys with plastic surgery and the mental, emotional, and physical toll it took on us. Today, we're joined by Heidi, a 37-year-old who navigated being a young parent, losing both of her parents, and making a major career shift. She moved from child development and social work into the beauty industry. Heidi now offers services including post-op massages for clients recovering from plastic surgery, supporting them through one of the most vulnerable parts of the healing process. We'll also talk about this new chapter of her life, rediscovering herself, setting personal goals, and reflecting on what she's most proud of. Let's get into today's episode.
Thank you so much for being here. I appreciate the support. So getting into the questions, what was your childhood like?
Well, first of all, thank you for having me. Thank you for the space. My childhood was I think I was very fortunate. And I think it wasn't until I got older that I realized so many more things. But when I was younger, I had an amazing childhood. I was surrounded with like love. My parents were always available to us, more so my mom. But even though my grandparents didn't live here, we had a really close relationship with my family in Mexico. And so grew up in a house where I was loved and I was cared for and I was nurtured and I was given a lot of things maybe that other kids didn't have. And I didn't realize that until I got older and I realized that not every family is like that. And even my relationship with my mom, my relationship with my mom was really, really close. You know, if she was my best friend. And so it wasn't until I lost her that I started talking to other women with, in the business that I'm doing and clients and just people that I met. And I didn't understand why their relationship with their mom wasn't the same as the one that I had, and
Yeah.
it took a toll on me understanding that, oh my God, like not everybody was fortunate to have a close relationship with their parents, with their family, and even just the building that connection, And so I think like I was blessed to have an amazing childhood with my parents, with my family, and everybody who surrounded me.
And you have one full sister and then you have half brothers, right?
Correct. I have one sister. She's my younger sister. And then I have two brothers that were from my dad's previous marriage, who at one point we had a good relationship, but I think over time, just things happen and the relationship damaged. And once my dad passed away, the relationship
Yeah.
just really wasn't there anymore. Sometimes I wish that we were close, but then there's times where I'm like, you know what? Like there's been so much hurt and so many things that had happened that I feel like I just always see my sister and I'm like, this is my sister, like
Yeah.
I don't need to look for something else. And, you know, once we get into the questions, you'll be able to understand a little bit more. But, my and my sister have been through a lot, with our parents, losing our parents, losing most of our family,
Yeah.
just me and her at this point and our kids and my husband. And so I think I'm very fortunate to have my sister.
Do you think she had the same relationship with your mom as that you did?
Yeah, we were
You did?
all
Okay.
three of us were really, really close. We were one. We were a unit, and we both struggled when my mom passed away. And now that my sister, is going through therapy, she realized so many more things. And I felt there's moments where I felt guilty talking to her recently because she didn't get an opportunity to grieve my parents, And I don't think my parents did it on purpose, but my parents were so worried about me, how I was going to handle things with my anxiety, with my kids, that they didn't give her an opportunity to break down. And so they put that pressure on her, like, you need to be okay because your sisters need to be okay.
Yeah.
And so it wasn't until recently when we were talking that she said, you know what, like, I'm so angry because I know my parents love me, but they were so worried about you, they were so worried about like, you need to be okay for your sister. And I was also losing my parents and I didn't get that opportunity. So I think that also took a blind off me, right? Because then I'm like, oh my God, I apologized to her. I was like, I'm so sorry. Like, I didn't know. And I feel terrible that because I was so stuck in my grief and my feelings and my emotions of like losing my parents, she was also losing her parents. So, I love my sister. My sister's like my best friend. And I don't think that we would be the same person if I didn't have her, because of her, I feel like I've come a long way and her support, her guidance, she's my little sister. And sometimes I look up to her because she has so many qualities. And I'm like, oh my God, I don't know how she does it.
After losing your parents, did you go to therapy?
I didn't. I tried. And I feel like it was really hard for me because to me, not that I didn't grow up thinking like therapy wasn't good. I just felt like they're just going to listen to me and then they're going to just
Yeah.
tell me like,
Yeah.
well, how do you feel about it? You know? And I was like, all these little plays would play in my head of like, like I already know how I feel about it.
Mhm.
Or it's writing about it is not going to make me feel better. Like I'm going through this, right? I don't need you to solve it. I just need like, I just want my parents, and it was a really hard thing to struggle with. And my sister would always tell me, like, you should go to therapy. You should go to therapy. I think it would be good for you. And I didn't. And it wasn't until recently that I started therapy because with the whole immigration thing, it took a different toll on me because me and my husband have been together for almost 22 years, actually, on
Wow.
tomorrow, on
Oh.
Sunday. And so, even though we got together when we were really young, he was born in Mexico. And when we met in high school, when you're young, you don't think about any of these things, right? And on
Mhm.
top of the fact that I never consider about like, are you legal? Are you
Mhm.
not? Like that never crossed my mind. And so over the years, once it wasn't until we got married, they were like, okay, we gotta fix your papers. Like we gotta do something. So we got married, we did the process, but in the process, my mom passed away. He got
Mhm.
scammed by an attorney, so we
Oh.
lost all this money.
Mm.
So then it was kind of like, okay, we're stuck. And then recently, with everything that happened with immigration and stuff, I started getting this fear of like, oh my God, I lost my parents. What if something happens with my husband?
Mhm.
And I was like, I need to go to therapy. Like, I need to know that, like, I need an outlet. I need to talk to someone. Like, these feelings, I wasn't sleeping. I was feeling horrible. And so I ended up going to therapy. And I do feel like it helped me because it gave me an outlet to talk to someone who wasn't in my circle, to talk to someone that didn't have an opinion and that ultimately listened. And I think I saw it with a different perspective than
Mhm.
when it initially crossed my mind the first time, where I'm like, they're just going to listen to me
Mm.
and they're just going to tell me like, write about it. Right. And so I did, I wrote things about like my feelings, like things that I thought about, my experience with death, and everything that I experienced death when I was 12. I saw my grandpa passed away. I was sitting in his lap. And so I think there's so many things that I didn't know that I had PTSD because of death. There was this sense of like someone who's going to die next. What's going to happen next? And so it wasn't until I started going to therapy that I realized like, oh my God, like there's so many things that I need to work on. There's so many things that I need to like let go of, and there's growth that comes with it. Right. And which is why I feel like now, even as a mom, like I feel like I've learned to let go a little bit with my kids because I'm letting go of like that fear. Yes, that fear is always going to be there of like, what if something happens, right?
Mhm.
But I can't control what's going to happen next. And I think that's one of the things that I had to learn to like, okay, I can't think that far
Yeah.
again. Like I
Mhm.
can't jump and think like, oh my God, yes, my kid is going to go out and something terrible is going to happen, because it might not be like that.
Mhm.
And so I had to move away from that mindset, and going to therapy did help me a lot. And it has helped me grow and see things with a different perspective and just sort of heal some of those things that I didn't know were there that
Yeah.
had happened, through the process of losing my mom, through my husband's immigration process, through the process of losing my dad, the relationships around everybody. So I do feel like I do encourage therapy, and yes, they listen to you, they tell you right about it, but it does help you.
So going back, so you met your husband in high school.
Yes.
So you went to high school here in the United States,
Mhm.
right? Okay, and you met. And then how long after you met did you find out that you were pregnant?
Oh, it wasn't until like a year. I mean, we were boyfriend, girlfriend like for a while, and it wasn't until later on that he was my first sexual experience. Like he
Wow.
was my first like official boyfriend. He was like my first ever. And I value that. And I was like, oh my God, like I can't just, this is sacred, right? And so we were dating for a while, and then we ended up having sex. And then next thing you know, we were pregnant, and that's all it took.
Wow.
The one time, and I was pregnant.
You got
And
pregnant the first
The first
time
time?
you were intimate with your
yeah.
boyfriend. Wow.
Wow.
How
And
did you know anything about sex at that
I
point?
did.
Okay.
I ironically, like, it's crazy because a lot of the times teen pregnancies happen because parents don't talk to their
Mhm.
kids about it, right?
Mhm. Yeah.
My mom, again, she was my best friend. She had so much good communication with us. I remember
Wow.
being like 12, and she talked to us about condoms, about
Wow.
what it was to make love, right? Like you have a husband, this is your husband. We had a really good relationship. And the reason she talked to us about condoms and things like that was because we lived in Oakland, and in Oakland,
Oh,
we didn't live in the nicest neighborhood. So sometimes we would be walking around and her whole thing was like, I don't ever want you to pick anything that you see on the streets like this. So she had a conversation about what were condoms and all this. So we had a conversation. So even with that, like I tell my kids, you're young, hormones happen,
Yeah.
you're not thinking about it's going to happen to you. You're just caught in the moment with this person that means everything to you. And it just happened. And the next thing you know, I was pregnant and I was so scared because not what my parents were going to do, but because I feel like I had disappointed them. I feel like they had the conversation with me. It's not like I didn't know what was I doing, and I was really not scared of them, but scared of like hurting them. And so what ended up hurting my mom the most was that I didn't come to her, that I came to someone else and I told them, and it was someone else that I told, and then she found out, and my mom was more hurt from it. She's like, I'm not hurt that you're pregnant. Like, a child's a blessing. I'm more hurt that you didn't come to me. And that crushed me even more. Until this day, I feel like it's something that hurts me because I hurt her more stay with my pregnancy, but because of the trust that we have,
Yeah.
So I feel like that's one of the hardest things that I had to deal with my pregnancy, not even my husband not being there, because when we first found out that we were pregnant, we were young, so he wasn't by my side. So that was already difficult, but I think it was more the hardest part was I let her down and I didn't confide in her. She's my best friend and I didn't come to her and tell her. She had to find out because someone else told her, and I think that's where she was more hurt than anything. But yeah, once they found out, my dad, obviously, he was, he had some words. They were not the nicest, but then over time, he was there. My parents were very supportive. I ended up finishing school. I graduated from high school. I went to college, and through my whole pregnancy, my parents were there on my side. Me and my husband were on and off, and his parents didn't find out that I was pregnant until like I was further along. But throughout my pregnancy, we didn't really have a relationship. My husband wasn't there until I gave birth to my son.
Wow.
He wasn't on.
So you didn't know if you were going to stay together.
Yeah, we didn't know. I mean, he was really scared. I was scared. But again, I had a great support system, which were my parents, my sister, my children are like my sister's kids. And so my husband, I remember like we were in the hospital and my mom was there, and then my husband showed up, and I was like, no, I want my kids to have their dad, So he was there. And so then obviously then my son was born, and it was an adjustment, trying to adjust to like living
you were
together.
18 when
I got pregnant at 17 and I had my son when I was 18.
So going back just a little bit, so you were in high school during your whole pregnancy.
Yeah.
Did you ever receive any backlash from people around you in high school?
No, I didn't receive any backlash. So I was in school. I was in high school, and then because my pregnancy towards, I think I shared this in the past when I had a cyst. And so as my babies would get bigger, the cyst would start bothering me. So that's how I found out that I had a cyst, because as my baby was getting bigger and my belly was growing, I started having a lot of pain and a lot of like problems with my pregnancy. So then they put me out. So then I started doing homeschool. And but I still was able to walk the stage with my class. I still went to prom. I have my prom picture and I'm like pregnant with my dress. So, I mean, my high school experience was fine. I didn't feel like I was like singled out or anything. So I didn't have a problem with it. My parents, again, were supportive. I mean, they weren't like, oh my God, like, yeah, this is what we wanted for you. But they were like, okay, this is a situation. We want to be there for you. We want to be there for him, for the baby, saying whatever you want, we want for you. And so in that aspect, I was very lucky. I remember there was other girls that were pregnant and their parents would kick them out. That was never my case. My parents were very supportive. And then once I graduated high school, I went to Merritt College, and I went to Merritt College, and I remember one of my teachers threw me a baby shower. Like, I had a really good support system, and even I went and I had my baby in November, and it was like finals or midterms. I can't remember, but I had to go do a test, and I was getting discharged from the hospital. And I remember that I got discharged, and that night I went and I did my test, and I took my
Wow.
baby with me. And I was like, there is no way that I'm failing this class. Like, I'm going to make sure that I pass. So again, like, I was very determined, because to me it was like, okay, I don't only have to do this for myself. Now I have this baby, and I have to make sure that he's my motivation, and I
Yeah.
want to make sure that I'm successful. And I think one of the things also what did push me was throughout when I found out I was pregnant, I was doing an internship and I was in AmeriCorp, and there was someone that told me, well, it's typical, you're Mexican. That's why you're pregnant,
Oh my
Wow.
gosh.
And I think that always stayed with me. And I think that was kind of like my drive to like keep going, like, okay, this is gonna be like my drive to like make sure
Yeah.
that I keep pushing through it. Like, I'm not going to be in a statistic. I'm going to make sure that I do something for myself, for my family, and I'm not going to depend on anything, like no assistance or anything. Yes, I used assistance. They helped me. I was able to like pay for books, to transportation. But I was like, I don't want to become codependent on this. I want to make sure that I have something better. And so I think that was pretty much what my drive to keep going and to be better.
Wow, that's amazing.
That's
So,
so inspiring.
so during this time that you were at Merritt College, were you with your husband? So you were both taking care of the
Yeah.
baby?
We were at that point. There was, we were young, so there was a lot of like, I would get mad, I would go back to my parents' house. He would get mad, he would go to his parents' house. So there was a lot of uh instability. We were like jumping back and forth. But during the time, like when at one point I ended up going to his parents' house, and we were living in his parents' house, and I was taking night classes, and I was working during the day, and he was still going to school because my husband is also 1 year younger than me. So he was he was in high school. So I had already graduated. He was in high school. So while he was in school, I was working, and then I would go to school at night, and then he was going to high school in the morning, and then he was going to work in the afternoon. So we were
Wow.
like trying to make it work, right?
Yeah.
And so I remember I would take the bus to the school. My brother-in-law would help me take care of the baby. And so, I mean, again, once his family became involved, they were also very supportive in terms of like being there, like helping us take care of the baby and stuff like that. So again, we were very, very lucky.
So how long after you got pregnant did you move out from your parents' house?
So it wasn't until I had my baby. So I think my son was probably like a month, 2 months. I was upset about like him and coming around, and my mom saying like, okay, well, what's the plan? How is he going to help? Is he going to be in the picture? Is he not? You're young. You're like, you're not going to tell me what to do. Me
Yeah,
ponme voy,
yeah.
right? So then I ended up leaving, and I moved into his house, and we had a little twin bed. He had a little twin bed, and the baby would sleep in the bed, and then we would sleep on the floor. And so we just made it work. We were determined. And then obviously, like I said, we were very unstable. So then we would get upset, and then I would go to my parents' house, and I would be back and forth. But I mean, even then, like, we've been together for 22 years. And I feel like now I'm like, yeah, that was part of growth. It was part of learning. Like,
Yeah.
there was a lot of growth that needed to happen. I was like, we were kids having kids. And at the end of the day, I had to learn from him. He had to learn from me. We've grown together. Even with my kids, I feel like my oldest is going to be 20. And so I feel like now it's a sense of identity that I feel like I'm like losing, right? Because like for the last 19 years, I've been a mom,
Yeah.
and so which puts me at like 16, 17 years old. And I'm over here like, okay, now what? Like, what does this look like? This is all foreign to me. I never got to experience what were my hobbies? Like, what did I like to? What did I didn't? Not so long ago, my sister took the kids to LA, and it was just me and my husband at home. And my husband's like, let's go have dinner. And I was like, okay. So then we got ready and everything. And he's like, well, what do you want to eat? I'm like, I don't know. This is really hard because we never decide. It's always decide for us. I was like, this is weird. I'm like, I'm not used to this, like being able to decide for ourselves because our kids always decide, you know? So that's something that we're having to learn now, right? Like, what are we into? What do we like? What do we don't like? And compared to when we were younger, we were boyfriend and girlfriend, but we never really lived together. We never really experienced like, you're in high school, like outings, like nowadays kids go out more, right? I never went out. I never really, again, not because my mom didn't let me. I didn't have a need to be like, oh, I need to go out or do anything.
Mhm.
So I didn't really get that opportunity. And so as we were being parents, growing up, going to school, working, feeling the stress and feeling like we were going to fail because there was a lot of people that I felt like almost felt like we were going to be failures and that our kids were going to be no good.
Yeah.
And to me, it was like, no, like our kids are going to be great kids. We're going to be great parents. And some of you guys, the relationships will be broken and ours are going to be fine. Right.
Yeah.
And yes, our relationship struggle, like any relationship, there was ups, there was downs, and there was ways of like us learning to adapt to each other, to see what we're into, and then voicing it too. I feel like that's another thing that I've learned recently. It's like I set expectations sometimes on my husband without even telling him, and then
Oh,
I get
yeah.
upset
Yeah,
about it
same.
because I'm like, oh my God, you should have known. And I'm like, how can he know if
Yeah.
I'm not voicing them or letting him know? And so I think part of the problem in the beginning of a relationship was that like there was all these expectations that I felt that I needed him to, I guess, fulfill. But then there was also a sense of control. Like I had to learn to let go and not be so much in control. And that's something that I'm working on now recently because I'm like, sometimes I feel like I have this manly energy, right? Like I'm going to take care of it. I'm
Mhm.
going to handle it. Like, nobody's going to tell me I did this for you or anything. And I feel like now I'm like, no, it's okay to ask for help. It's okay to be vulnerable. It's okay to feel like I need you to do this for me, And I think that has opened a different path in my relationship with my husband where I'm like, okay, I'm not just expecting you to do things. I'm telling you, hey, I need this from you,
Yeah.
And I think it holds more value than when all these fights happen and you don't even know why you're upset
Mm.
because there's like, well, there's this expectation that I never realized that I needed.
Yeah.
So I think we've grown a lot as a couple.
Yeah, I think it's just as women, it's really hard to ask for help because
Yeah.
then it's like the fight where it's like, well, you should have known that
Mhm.
you needed to do this for me, or
Yeah.
that you should have known that I needed you to do this for me, and you just go in circles. They're like, how am I supposed to know if you never told me?
Yeah.
Like, well, you just should know. And
Yeah.
this
Yeah.
just keeps
Yeah,
going
it's
in
so true.
circles.
And I think it's one of those things where they're not mind readers, right?
Yeah.
Like we should tell them like, hey, I need this or I need that, or I'm not comfortable with this, or I don't like the way that you're talking to me, and not putting up a fight about it. And before I used to be like, you're not going to tell me, how dare you talk to me
Yeah.
like, oh no, we're going to go head to head. And so I feel like now I'm at a point like, we have to respect each other and we also have to set boundaries and tell you like, I'm okay with this and I'm not okay with that. Or I didn't like the way that this happened,
Mhm.
And also because at the end of the day, I tell him like, our kids are watching, my
Yeah.
daughter's watching. I want to make sure that she gets respected, but that she also knows how to respect other people. And so I'm like, yeah, like sometimes it's so easy to respect because especially with this generation, right? You just goof around and you're joking around all the time that sometimes you can get caught up. I tell my husband sometimes, I was like, that was rude. You were very disrespectful and I didn't like it. And then he's like, I'm sorry. And I'm like, okay, and before I wasn't able to that.
Yeah.
I would just be
Mhm.
upset about it and I would
Yeah.
be so mad. And I'm like, oh my God, like I'm going to do something to get back at him,
Yeah.
And so now I'm like, man, that's immature, like he needs to know, like, no, I'm not okay with that.
Yeah.
So when you were in merit college and you had your son, how was your reaction when you found out you were pregnant again?
So when I found out I was pregnant again, it was really hard. I think I was so like, oh my gosh, like I'm pregnant because when I had my son, I got an IUD. And so I
Mhm.
got an IUD and that was going to be my birth control, right? And so my second son is going on 18. So my kids are only about a year apart. So when I found out that I was pregnant, I'm like, can't be like I have an
Mhm.
IUD. I had like I don't understand. And when I went to the doctor, they're like, no, you're pregnant. And I'm like, how? And
Gosh.
then they told me, well, probably it wasn't placed right. The Mirena was not placed right, or you probably didn't wait enough to have sexual intercourse. And I'm like, oh my God, now what? What are we gonna do? And so then they told me, we're gonna remove the Mirena, but there's a chance that you might lose your baby, right? And so then I'm like, oh my God. So now it's like they tell you you're pregnant and now you're like at a possibility of losing that baby. You're already like, oh my God, like what's happening? So it was really hard. They ended up removing the Mirena. My baby was fine. He's fine now. But I think it was hard realizing like, oh my God, like we're gonna have a baby again. And what is this gonna look like? Right. Like it's almost like you gotta be serious now. Like, what are we doing? And so I mean, at that point we were already living back at my house with my mom. And my husband was, very supportive. He was there. He continued to work nights because it was how we would manage childcare. Like he would work nights, I would work during the day. My parents would help in between. But my son was born early. So he was born at 36 weeks. I got induced, and same thing through my pregnancy. It was like I had the same problem with my cyst, and it was complications, and it was just really hard. And so I ended up having him at 36 weeks. And once I had him, he was fine. We got discharged from the hospital. He was born in April, and in November, he got really sick, and we were in the hospital for almost a month because he got bronchiolitis. Both of the kids got bronchiolitis, but my oldest was a little bit bigger, so his body was able to tolerate it. He didn't have to be hospitalized, but my little baby was. And so that was also one of the hardest things because they basically told me like, we don't know if the baby's going to make it,
Oh my gosh.
And so at first we were in and out of children because they didn't know what was happening with him. Then once he was admitted, we were there. We spent pretty much Thanksgiving in the hospital, and they were just like taking it a day at a time, and obviously he made it. He's fine now, but it was very hard. I think it was one of the hardest things to know, like, oh my God, what's going to happen with my baby? Here we are with another baby. We still have our other son, and he's also sick, and trying to figure that out. That was also very hard.
Yeah, that sounds really scary.
It was very scary.
Yeah. And so now you have your 2 kids and you're still going to college.
Mm-hmm.
And so you're going to college, you're working with your 2 kids, living with your parents. Okay.
Yeah. So we were living at the time, we were still living with my mom. We're working, we have our 2 kids. And at that point, I had already started working in the childcare industry. So I was working as a teacher. Then my kids were old enough to go to daycare. So then they started going to an early head start program. And then we're basically on and off relationship because, again, we were young. So we were very unstable. We would be going back and forth. But then couple years later, my birth control was the Mirena. Couple years
You
later,
trusted
go
it
back.
again.
Yes, I trusted it again. And a couple years later, at one point we ended up moving to my in-laws. They had an apartment, and so we moved into the apartment, and it was just my little family, my 2 kids, my husband and I. My husband was working nights. I was going to school, and then I was working. And I think one of the main things why we would have so much friction at times with my husband, it was because he didn't understand the relationship that I had with my mom and how important my mom was in the relationship. He felt like, you're my wife. Why are you spending so much time with your mom? Or why is your mom coming and picking up the kids? And now I understand that it's also important that once you build your own family, that becomes your family, right? And you sometimes have to put those boundaries. But I also feel like I was so close to my mom, and I feel like I also now, because of my mom, passing away from stomach cancer, I feel like I have to see things with a different perspective now, that we were lucky that she was able to create so many memories with my kids and share so many moments, that things happened because they needed to happen that way, right? Like God needed to give her an opportunity to be there for my kids, to be that grandma, to be there for me, because she wasn't going to be here with us for a long time, And so now that I can see things with that perspective, I tell my husband, we talk about it, and he's like, yeah, like, we don't know. And he's like, yeah, you're right. Sometimes I would get upset, but look, like, it was the blessing that your mom was able to spend all these memories with the kids, because that would be one of the things that we would sometimes have arguments, like, why does your mom have to buy all these things for the kids? Or why does your mom have to come and pick up the kids? And it was almost like an ego thing. I feel like for a man, like, I feel like it was like his ego was like, well, I'm the man of the house, right? Like, especially being Hispanic, I feel like there's that pressure of like, you're the man of the house. Things should happen this way. And that was one of the reasons why we would bump heads, because my mom would be like, oh, I'm going to take the kids to do X, Y, and Z. And then my husband's like, no, I'm not okay with that. And I'm like, but why? Like she wants to spend time with the kids.
Yeah.
No, but the kids are your responsibility. And I'm like, no, I get it. But still, like, she wants to spend time with the
Yeah.
kids. So we would have a lot of issues with that. But now, like I said, you grow, you learn. And I feel like things were meant to happen the way that they were, because again, she was able to create so many opportunities with the kids. But yeah, then we were living in this apartment and I get really sick. I don't know what's happening. I'm like throwing up, and I'm like, the first time that I got really sick, I started with a UTI and it turned into like an infection that traveled to my blood, and I ended up getting hospitalized. So then I was hospitalized for a while, and then I got discharged. So then I ended up getting sick again, and I'm thinking like it's the same thing. I'm going to the doctor, and then my husband takes me to the emergency room, and they're like, "Well, is there any chance you're pregnant?" I'm like, "No, I have an IUD. I think I have a urine infection. It probably traveled to my blood. It sometimes happens." And they're like, "Okay, well, we're just gonna do a pregnancy test." And then they come, they're like, "You're pregnant."
Oh,
I'm like,
wow.
oh
Oh my
my
gosh.
God. I started immediately crying. I was just like, because in my mind, I feel like we were at a place where we were okay. Like our kids were getting a little bit older. Childcare wasn't as like hard because now they were going to preschool and we had our own place. And here we are like sitting there, and I'm like, oh my God, what am I going to do? Like, why is this happening again? I didn't understand. And I remember that I called my mom and I'm like crying. My mom's thinking like, it's probably something really bad.
Yeah.
You're sick or something. And I'm like, no, I'm pregnant. And she was laughing. And she's like, but why are you crying? That's not something to be crying about. And I'm like, I just don't know what to do. She's like, we're going to figure it out. Like, why are you crying? And so again, my parents were super supportive throughout all of my pregnancies. And so then my daughter came along.
About 24 years old, you have three kids.
And your husband was 23.
And my husband was 23.
Wow, that
And at this point, had you already graduated college?
Yeah, I had obtained my AA degree in child development. I stopped school because I was already working full time, and I was like, I want to go back to school. I want to further my education, but right now I need to like focus on like work, being a provider for my kids, and figuring that out.
So, being 24, having 3 kids, did you ever feel like you had to grow up faster than other kids your age? Like, did you ever go through like a party phase?
I did, because I still was able to like, there was a point where I did go out. My sister was going out to parties or clubs, and there was times where I would go. So I would still go out, and I still feel like I was partying and stuff like that. But then I feel like there was this additional responsibility of like, well, I need to get home. I need to do this. I need to have my kids. And my husband wasn't a party person. And so there was a little bit of friction at times because he was super antisocial. He didn't want to go out. He was not someone that would like to go to parties or like socialize. Like he was like socially awkward. Like he did not like it. And so we would bump heads a lot because I'm super social. I'm like, hey, look at me. I'm doing the most. And he wasn't like that. So there was times where we would have arguments about he didn't understand, like, why do you want to go out? And I'm like, well, you go out with me, and he's like, I don't want to. And so I was like, so we would struggle. But I feel like the pressure was there mainly because, and not because society put it on me. I think I put it on myself. Like, no, I need to be responsible. I need to be there. I want my kids to make sure that they know that, you can still have fun, but I still have a responsibility, So I would say yes and no, not because society put it on there. I think I put it on myself just because I feel like I wanted to be better and I wanted to do something better for myself. And also because that thought of what that person told me never left my head of like, oh, it's expected. You're Mexican, And I think that has always, till this day, I still remember it, So I feel like that has always been there. And so I feel like that was always my motive. Like, no, like they can't be right. They're not going to be right,
Yeah.
So I think I put that pressure on myself.
What was your parenting style when your kids were younger?
I think I was very present. We did a lot of activities. My kids were involved in like play groups. They did participate in Head Start programs. I grew up in a very, like I said, nurturing home where we had a good communication. We talked about things. I love teaching. So I had a lot of books. We would do playtime. We would go to the library. So I feel like I was pretty present with my parenting. And I feel like because of how I grew up, right? But my husband wasn't. And so there was times where I would struggle, even though my husband's an amazing dad and he's present with the kids, there was times where I'm like, you can't be so rough with them, you know?
Mm.
You need to be more nurturing. You need to be more loving. You need to know affection. And it was hard because he expresses to me in life, he's like, I didn't grow up like that. You know,
Yeah.
in my household, it wasn't, I love you. It wasn't share affection. In my household, it was like, we love each other. We each talk about our feelings. We talk about, what's happening in your life. And he's like, you guys have that. I didn't, you know? So he struggled with that. And so my mom, because she was also in the child development industry, she would always tell me like he should participate in a dad's play group, it would really beneficial. And I would bring it up to him and he's like, no, I don't want to, like, that's for girls, the moms should
Mhm.
go. And I was like, no, you should go. And I slowly started getting him to go and he would go and he loved participating in the play groups.
Mhm.
He was able to go to a lot of play groups because his schedule, again, he worked evenings, so during the day he was going to like the play groups for my son, then my other son, then my daughter. So then he became very involved in like their education and the things that they do. And so I feel like because of that exposure, my husband is now he's probably the most patient with our kids than I am, and I think it comes from that. Like he has more patience. And even though like sometimes I'm like, oh my God, you need to be nurturing, I feel like he shows affection in so many other ways. And I'm like, you know what? He's come a long way because he didn't grow up in that type of environment,
Yeah.
and he's expressed it himself. He's like, I learned this from you. I learned this from watching your mom. I didn't experience this firsthand, and it was awkward too because he didn't know how to like receive the affection or the
Yeah.
love, and that was also really hard for him. But again, like I feel like our parenting skills are, I feel like there's always room for improvement, but I feel like we do the best that we can. And I feel like at the time we did the best that we could with the tools that we had on hand and with the situations that we had on hand. Yes, there was moments where I feel like, we shouldn't be fighting in front of our kids,
Mm.
or there was things that happened that our kids shouldn't be exposed to. But that now I'm like, you know what? Like sometimes you don't think because you're so caught in the moment that you don't realize, this can hurt your kids, And I feel like having those conversations of like, hey, we're not going to talk about this now because the kids are here, or no, I'm not going to entertain this. I'm not, my priority is making sure that the kids are okay right now. And I think it's setting those boundaries for everybody, not just for your significant other, but everybody, because kids are like sponges. They're
Yeah.
gonna like
Yeah.
pick up your body language. Our kids can pick up when you're stressed. And I noticed that with my daughter. If I'm stressed or I have anxiety, like I could see it that she picks up on it, right? And so I'm like, okay, no, I need to like fine tune it because she picks up on my body language. She can feel my tension. And so I think it's important but to have the conversations to like, yes, I'm stressed, but this is what I need to do, whether it's going on a walk or exercising or whatever that may look like. But I feel like overall we have really, really good communication with our kids, a really good relationship. I think one of the main things that I always go by as a parent is that we tend to fall into this idea of like we become friends with our kids. And I'm
Mhm.
like, I'm not your friend. I can be friendly with you, but I'm your mom and you respect me. And I need to
Mhm.
make sure that you understand that, right? Because if we become friends, then you're not gonna like my rules. You're not gonna like my boundaries. You're gonna feel like I'm a villain when I'm trying to like do some structure in our household. That if I'm friendly with you, yeah, you can come, you can tell me your stuff, you can communicate with me. I'm here, I'm gonna listen, but I'm gonna also discipline you. And there you also have to like follow the rules. You have to make sure that you're like on top of what you need to be. And I think that's super, super important. And that's a fine line that especially with this generation, sometimes parents forget because they want to be liked by their kids.
Yeah.
And like I tell my kids, you don't need to like me because at the end of the day, I'm your mom and you're not gonna like what I say. But I can be friendly with you, but you also need to respect me, And I think they have that pretty clear. One of the rules in my house is you do not call me bruh. And they have that like And they just immediately know, like, even when their friends come over, and their friends will slip, and then they're like, my mom doesn't like to be called that. And I'm like,
Oh.
yeah, like, you can call me mom, you can call me Heidi. I said, but I think there's a level of respect, and you guys need to understand that. And so I love the relationship that I have with my kids. My kids are like, I don't think I would be the person that I am today if it wasn't for them. And I also think that there was a plan for me to be a young mom, because that way my kids were going to be able to have their grandma for the longest that they were
Mhm.
able to have her, because if it wasn't, probably I wouldn't have had kids now, and my mom was not around, and
Mhm.
so I feel like there's everything happens for a reason, and there's a purpose for everything. And so I'm a true believer that if I was 17 having a child, it was because life was going to take my mom away when I was really young, and my
Mhm.
kids were going to lose their grandma. And so I think that that was meant to happen the way that it did. So I do believe that I don't think I would do anything different. I think I was blessed to be the mom to my kids that I am now, and to have the mom that I had. And so I don't think I would change anything.
So once you had your daughter, what was the plan after that for birth control?
Oh, once I had my daughter, I was like, tie my tubes. I'm not doing anything else. I was like, no, I'm not leaving until like something is taken care of. So once I had my daughter, well, I was pregnant. I was pregnant with her, and they had to induce me because my pregnancy with her was just horrible. I don't even have any pregnant pictures because I looked like I had been in a car wreck. Like, I developed so many things throughout my pregnancy. I had a pregnancy carpal tunnel, like my pelvic bone separated. That doesn't happen until you're about to give labor. Mine separated like at 5 months. And so the baby was putting pressure on my sciatica. Then I had the cyst that I was still dealing with. So they actually induced my labor at 36 weeks. And when we were doing paperwork to get induced, they're like, well, what's going to be your method of birth control? And I was like, tie my tubes. I don't want to be in this situation anymore. Like, this is really hard. And I remember that they even sent a social worker. They're like, oh my God, she doesn't want to be a mom. She doesn't want her baby. And I was like, no, I just don't want to be in the situation.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
I feel terrible. I have two other children that I can't be the best version of myself to take care of them because I'm in this situation. I'm having to get x-rays. I even had to get a CT scan at one point because they didn't know how much pressure she was putting on my nerve. And so they're like, so what's going to be? And I'm like, well, just tie my tubes. And I remember I had to sign some paperwork because they're like, you're so young, what's going to happen if you lose one of your kids and you want to have another one?
Oh,
And I'm like, I'm sorry, but you don't replace kids. If I lose
Yeah.
one, then I hope that doesn't happen, but I
Yeah.
don't think I could be like, okay, I lost the kid. Let me have another
Yeah.
one, right?
yeah.
So I had to sign some paperwork because they said that they needed to get approved through like the court because I was really young. And so once I did that, then I got induced a couple weeks later, and they made me go through labor. And then I ended up having a surgery the next day to get the cyst removed and to get my tubes tied. And so then after that, I was just like, okay, I was just healing because it almost felt like I had a C-section. So I couldn't like pick up my baby. I couldn't do so many things. But then after that, then it was just, I had my little girl, and I feel
Yeah.
like she changed my life forever. Like, all my kids have changed my life in different ways. But I feel like she has healed me in so many ways.
Yeah.
I think the part of, I'm sorry. I think the part of the relationship that I have with my mom, I feel like she fills that void for me. I think sometimes she doesn't understand it. I had a really hard time losing my mom, and I feel like she fulfills that aspect of like, she is my motive. All my three kids are my motive, but with her, it's just that I have that bond. I feel like I can connect with my mom that way.
Mhm.
And I think I didn't understand it. I'm like, it's the kids the boys make fun of me because they're like, you love her more. And I'm like, it's not that I love her more. It's not. I think it fulfills that void in me, like, of, I miss my mom. And to me, it's like, well, now I have her. I can create this relationship with
Yeah.
her. Yes, I lost my mom, and I lost that relationship with my mom when I lost her. But now I have the opportunity to create this beautiful relationship with my daughter so she can have the
Yeah.
same, you know? My husband told us he works nights. And so she'll come in the room and she's like, "Can we cuddle?" And I'm like, "Yeah." She's like, "Is my dad coming?" I'm like, "Not until the morning." She's like, "Okay." So she'll crawl into my bed and she's telling me about her day and she's telling me like about her friends and stuff like that. And like, I'm just sitting there and, you know, thinking of like that was my relationship with my mom,
Yeah.
you know, like, and I think it's so beautiful that I'm able to recreate that with her now. And I think that's the part where I get so emotional because I'm like, oh my God, like this was God's plan. Like you were supposed to be my last child. I was supposed to have a girl because again, I was going to lose my mom and I needed to continue to heal this part of me. And she's doing that with me, right? Because those are the things that I would do with my mom. You know, my mom would get home from work and she'd be like, "Oh, let's go get a coffee and walk through Marshalls and Ross." And even if we wouldn't buy anything, we would just walk through the store. And I'm able to do that with my daughter, you know? And my husband makes fun of me. He's like, "You don't even buy anything." I'm like, it's not even about that. This just heals me, you know,
Yeah.
because I have her and it's a way of me connecting with my mom, you know? And so like I said, being a mom is one of the things that I love more about myself. I never saw myself as a woman that I am today. And there's times where I'm like, am I doing a good job? You know, is this how it should be? And then when I sit back and you're seeing everything from a distance and you're seeing your kids and you're seeing your husband and you're seeing everything played out, this is how it should have been, you know? My kids are amazing young men, you know? Sometimes I'm just like, oh my God, like they're so well behaved. They've never given me any trouble. They've never really, yeah, you know, typical teenage kids that happen stuff, but never to the point where they need to be corrected or disciplined and stuff where I'm like losing my mind, you know? Cause sometimes you hear about all these things happening with teenagers. I'm like, I've never really had to experience that. And so I'm like, I'm so lucky in that way. But I think it just comes from like, having really good communication, being present with your kids, you know, actively involved. And, you know, sometimes the kids say, like, "You're doing too much, mom." And I'm like, no, like, I want to make sure you guys have a good childhood. I want to make sure you guys are creating memories, healthy memories, you know? And I also feel like it also heals part of me because I didn't get to experience some of these things, you know? Like sometimes it's silly, but like my son right now, he's in high school have all these senior activities going on. And like they were playing like senior assassin, right? And so he's like, "Mom, can you help me do this? And can you help me do that?" And we're over here like helping him, like me and my sister, and doing all these things. And I didn't realize, I'm like, you know what? Like it heals me because I'm almost living this experience through them because I didn't get that opportunity, right? And so sometimes he's like telling his friends, like, "Oh, my mom's doing this. Your mom's doing that? Like your mom's playing with you, your mom's doing all that." And I'm like, well, I think that's the benefit of number one, having a young mom or having young parents in general, but also that I can relate to you guys, right? Because sometimes there's moments where things happen that I feel like, well, you know, I can relate to that. I've been there, you know, like how am I going to handle this situation so that my kids feel comfortable enough talking to me about things, you know, about sex. You know, I found out my son had sex and I was sitting there like, oh my God, like what the heck's gonna happen, you know? But then I had to like fine tune it and I was like, okay, well, we got to address it. You know, we have to talk about it. You know, it's not the end of the world. It's just making sure that he's safe, that he's making good choices and this. And then, but it was opposite. My husband didn't know how to handle it. He didn't know how to talk about it. He's like, no, this is so weird. And I was like, no, we have to talk about it. You know, we have to talk to him. And so I think it's having those difficult conversations and stuff like that. And so I think it's just, I love the relationship that I have with my boys. I love the relationship that I have with my daughter. And it's not that I love them any different. I think I love them each in their own way. And just our relationship is different, you know, and the love is the same, but it's just different. The connections are different, you know?
Well, I feel like each kid, I have two boys, and like they each fulfill a different part in my life. Like my oldest son and my youngest son have totally polar opposite personalities. And like my older son, he's so rigid and everything has to be how he says. And like having to be calm with him and having to like, when he's having a tantrum, like, okay, get down to his level, look at him in the face, try to give him a hug and be really, really soft with him. Something that we didn't grow up having. It just heals that inner child in me where I needed someone to like like be soft with me. And my other son is so wild and free, and he just lives in his own world, and like he's just literally living in his own little universe. Like I can't explain it any other way, where nothing bothers him. He's so unbothered by life, and it heals that part of me that is so scared to live authentically because he's so authentically just himself. And no matter how much I try to like get him to calm down or just chill out, he won't do it. And it's like, it teaches me that like, you just have to be like, he's way too much, but that's okay.
Yeah.
He's okay being way too much.
And I think it also brings a different part of you, right? Like it heals you. It also, you're like, damn, I didn't know I was capable of this, right? Like I have so much patience. And that's times where I'm like, oh my God, I didn't know that I had this much impact on my kids. You know, when I see them being with a certain way with someone else, I'm like, oh my God, those are things that I've engraved in them. Those are things that I've taught them to be, you know? And now, especially now that they're older, you know, sometimes there's been times when I'm so big on empathy and just being empathetic for one another, because you never know what that person is going through, right? And there's been times where we're like, you know, driving around and we've seen someone without shoes, and it was during the summer and it was so hot, and my son's like, Mom, can you turn around? And I'm like, why? Can we turn around? And I was like, why? He's like, Mom, like his feet are bleeding. Can we go back to the house? Like we have like a bunch of shoes that I can just give to them. And paused and I'm like, oh my God. I was like, I'm so proud of you. Like, you know, like and life is happening so fast. And as an average teenage boy, you're not in tune with what's happening around you. You know, you're not in tune with what are someone else's struggles, right? And for him to be so in tune with it, I was like, oh my God. So we ended up going back and getting them the shoes. But my point to that is like, I think part of it has been everything that we have experienced as a family, but also everything that I've transmitted to them that have built them into like these boys at such a young age to be able to be so aware of their surroundings, to be so in tune with, I think also like with women because of me making sure that I'm okay, making sure that their sister's okay, making sure that there's nothing going on where they feel like they can't talk about it, that I feel like it made such an impact in the way that I see that they carry themselves, you know, even now that they're older. And sometimes I'm like, oh my God, like, you know, they're so empathetic. They're so caring. They show up for people in so many different ways. And just when I hear them talking about things, I'm just like, oh my God, you know, that's not an average teenage boy, you know?
Yeah.
But I also think it comes from like, unfortunately, they got to experience loss by losing both of their grandparents and seeing it firsthand what it is to lose someone and what does that look like in front of you when someone is losing their life and everything is happening in front of you and you can't do anything, you know? For a teenager, it's really hard. And for you to sit there and experience it, it does something to you, right? And I feel like for them, it builds them in a different way where they have empathy, where they see life with a different perspective. They don't take things lightly, and they value how fragile life is, you know? And I feel like that's also very, very important for such a young age.
Before we go into the conversation with grief and loss, being moms of young children, how would you recommend building a relationship like this? Because we did not grow up with relationships like this in our house.
I think communication. I think, if anything, I think is communication, making sure you're talking to your kids, that we offer a safe space where there's no judgment. You know, a lot of the times as parents, you're like, oh, you're judging them right away, right? Or we're not going to talk about it, or that's not important. And one of the things that I always say, because I also teach parenting classes and I teach parenting classes online through other parents on positive discipline, one of the things that I always tell them is like, you know, it's so important that we understand that for us, what our kids are going through might not be big because we're so busy with like work. We have real life problems, right? But in their mind, whatever they're going through is big enough for them.
Yeah.
And I think if it's big enough for them, we have to allow them to have that space to like vent. Like, oh, I could see that you're hurt. Can you tell me why you're hurt? You know, or I see that you're really upset. What made you so upset? And oh, you lost your toe. See, I could see how that can be very hard for you. And just allowing them that space, because we're so stressed and life is happening so fast, sometimes we lose that. And it's like, okay, well, I'll buy you another one. And it's an easy fix, right?
Yeah.
But you don't realize we're just putting a Band-Aid instead of like really sitting there. And kids just want to be heard. They want to feel like they can relate. They want to feel like they belong somewhere. They want to feel like you're nurturing them. And I think that's the main thing. I think that's one of the things that I'm big on. For me, the biggest thing is communication, having communication, whether it's hard. Sometimes, there's going to be hard conversations, but they have to happen. But I also understand that sometimes you're not ready to have that conversation, and also letting you know, I understand that you're not ready to have this conversation right now, but we're going to have this conversation when you are ready. So when you're ready, you can come and talk to me about it. And making yourself available for them. And I always tell my kids, I don't like surprises, so don't surprise me. I want to hear it firsthand from you, whether it's good or bad. You have to understand that I'm your mom. I'm always going to be behind you. I said, but if you don't tell me, then I can't support you. And so for me, it's like, I'd rather you tell me and be honest and take accountability than if you don't tell me, then I can't help you. So how can I be there for you and support you when you're not being honest and not taking accountability? Or if you made a mistake, mistakes are going to happen. I make mistakes, even as an adult, but it's how we go about it and how we come out of those mistakes and we grow from them, And I think it's just building those connections and relationships with your kids. One of the things that I'm so big on is also connection before correction, right? We have to connect before I'm able to correct you. If we're not connecting, then how can I correct you? One of the things that I also talk about in my parenting classes, a lot of the times parents have this idea of like punishment is like, I'm going to hit you, right? And so I always give the scenario, you have a kid that's hitting and your way of correcting them is like, I'm going to go hit you. What is the message that you're sending? You're sending the message of like, this is how you fix things by hitting. So how can you correct hitting if you're hitting them too? So I would say like, be mindful, a lot of like our parenting skills come from like what we learn from our parents. And we have to be like, it's almost like your parenting styles. And sometimes you have to be mindful of your parenting styles and how also the parenting styles align with your temperament. Temperament is something that we're born with, right? Unlike personality. Personality happens through your experiences. It develops through like your relationships in life, your environment. Temperament, it's just something that we're naturally born with. But sometimes the temperament might not, it's different. And then the connection of the parenting style might be different. So as parents, it's our job to like fine tune ourselves and see like, well, how can I make sure my child's successful? What can I do better? Yeah, like I need to maybe, hey, if my kid is gonna have a hard time with like leaving and they're not flexible, then perhaps, hey, let me give them a warning. Hey, we're gonna leave in 5 minutes. I need you to be ready. And I think it comes from all of these things that like they can be very, very small that can make your parenting a lot easier. I think for me, that's one of the things that I've learned with my kids is like, well, I have to meet them where they are and I have to see where they need help and how can I support them so they can be successful.
Shifting gears a little bit. When your mom passed away, did you have your daughter already?
Yeah. My daughter was born in 2012. My mom got diagnosed in 2013.
Wow. So a little bit after you had your daughter.
Yeah. My mom got diagnosed November of 2013.
Wow. And she got diagnosed with cancer.
With stomach cancer.
How far along was she?
When she first got diagnosed, it was at a stage 1. So it was really, really like the beginning stages of it. And we got a call. It was Thanksgiving Eve because we were in their house and we were cooking and we were getting everything. And my mom was big on holidays. Like she loved holidays. And so we were cooking and with the phone rang in our house. This was back when we had a phone line. Not everybody had a phone line. And it was the doctor and they just called and they just told us, I picked up the phone and I just heard the results and I immediately thought like, she's going to die. You're telling me that my mom's going to die. As soon as I heard cancer, to me, it was just like, it's her death sentence. Like that's how I saw it.
Wow.
And I remember she got on the phone and she was like talking and then it just became like a blur because then I remember that she still pushed through to like cooking dinner for us and I was just crying hysterically like, oh my God, like this is it. Like what is going to happen? Like everything changed from that. And then from there, they were like, well, yeah, we're going to call to schedule appointments. But because it was holidays, everything was like closed, right? It was
Yeah.
on holidays. And so me and my sister were really proactive in terms of like, well, we're not going to wait until someone calls us. We were calling, we were getting her appointments. Even we drove, even we were living in San Leandro. And we're like, we don't care. We'll drive to San Francisco. We'll drive to San Mateo. So we visited so many Kaisers because we're like, we just need appointments wherever they're available. Kaiser is Kaiser, so it doesn't matter, right?
Yeah.
So we were driving around trying to make sure that she would get seen and got her appointments. And then once we established a plan and her treatment started, and her treatments were very aggressive at the beginning. She had to do a couple rounds of chemo, and then she had surgery, and then she had another round of chemos. And the chemo rounds were really intense because not only was she getting like an 8-hour infusion chemo session, she would have to come home with a pump. That was like an infusion that she would had, and it was really hard. I think it was one of the hardest things for me, because at the time I had just gone back to work, and then when my mom got diagnosed, um, I stopped working and I started going with her to her appointments. And so I would go to her chemo sessions with her. And I remember that I would sit, they had like the chemo stations and all the chairs. And I would sit in front of her in a chair, and I would sit there and I would just like cry and cry and cry. And one day she told me, why are you crying? And I'm like, because you're in this situation. And she's like, te miras bien mal. Parece que tú eres la que estás enferma. And I'm like, how can you be so mean to me? And she's like, no, para de llorar. No estés llorando. Ve, te ves toda demacrada. No traes ni maquillaje. Because my mom was big on makeup. Oh my God. She would go to her chemos and she had a glam. Her makeup was done, everything. And for me, it was really hard. And I don't think I mean, I would tell her like, because you're going through this, right? But I don't think I ever told her like, it's really hard to watch you and feel helpless.
Yeah.
Watching from this, like you're going through this and I'm just sitting here and there's nothing I can do to help you, right? You're feeling sick. You're feeling like it's draining. Not only are you sitting there for 8 hours, now you have to come home with this pump, and you have this ongoing pump, and the pump would be there for about a week. And then she would go and get the pump removed, and then she would have a break, and then a next chemo would come, and then again 8-hour chemo, ongoing pump for a week. And it was really hard to watch her go through that, how it was like her life was slipping away and there was nothing that I could do to make it better, right? But even with that, I feel like she was one of the strongest women I know. She was amazing. She carried herself with so much grace. Just, I never saw her break down. I never saw her break down. I never saw her like be upset about like, I'm going through this. And so, throughout the whole 7 years that she battled the cancer, she gave the best version of herself to me, to my kids. She took advantage of her illness. We would go to Disneyland and she'd be like, take me so they can give me a pass. And I was like, a pass for what? So we can skip line because I have cancer. They have to let me skip line. And I'm like, oh my God. She got out of a ticket because she told the cop, I have cancer. I can't get a ticket. And I'm like, oh my God. So I feel like and I don't know if that was just her way of coping with it.
Yeah.
But she would do the most with my kids. She would take them to trips. She spent so much time with kids. And sometimes my husband would be like, your mom is doing so many things for the kids, And one day I just told him, I'm like, let her, like, we don't know when it's going to happen, because at the time we don't know. The first rounds of chemo, she had chemo, she had surgery, then she had chemo, and then it was stopped basically.
She was in remission?
She was in remission. And then every time she would go for a PET scan, it was kind of like the nerves would come back. Like, is it going to be back, And yeah, there was times where she would go and then they would say, yeah, it's back. and then we need to like do chemo again. And so it's like, what is this going to look like, you know? And so then she would start chemo again. She had another round of surgery and then chemo again. And then again, she was in remission, and then she went back, and then it was like, what's back? But this time where there's really nothing that we can do. We're just gonna do chemo, but it's not to cure you. It's almost to slow the process down, to basically help it, almost like freeze it, so it's not growing so quickly. And so, and she was on chemo after that, and I mean, pretty much until she said, "I'm done. I don't want to do chemo anymore." And it was the year that it was 2018, end of 2018, where she's like her health started declining more and more and more. She was in and out the hospital. She got sepsis. Like so many things happened where she was like, I'm done. I'm tired. Like, I don't want to do this anymore. Like, I already did what I had to do. I almost feel like she fought the 7 years that she did to prepare us. I feel like through the 7 years, she did such a good job as to like talking to us and working with us on like, this is how I think I want things to happen, you know? And I admire her strength, even at the end, you know, because I'm like, oh my God, I cannot imagine going through this and still holding it together for us, you know? Um, and feeling like, damn, like she can't break down, you know? Like I never saw her break down, I mean, not even when she said like, I want to do hospice, you know, because when she said like, I want to do hospice, the idea of hospice came up. We're like, absolutely not, you know, like for us. And then like we were giving up, and we're like, we don't want to give up. But then I also had to like understand, like, we can't be selfish, you know, like because we love her. And when you love someone, you also need to make sure that you put your pain aside and you let them. Right. And so me and my sister told her, we want whatever you want. If you feel like you're done, then we're going to be there by your side. Whatever you decide is what we want, because only you know what you're going through. And so she's like, I'm done. I already did what I had to do. And she said she wanted to do hospice. So we said, okay. And so then we went through the process of hospice. And then from there, like she got admitted into hospice. Then they started like managing her pain, because pain, it was more. And before that, well, let me go back a little bit. Before like even the whole like chemo stopped working, there was a point where my mom was like, you know what, if it gets to the point where I'm not going to die with dignity, like I want to be in control. She's like, I don't want to feel like this disease is going to take me. So she talked to someone about the possibility of giving her a pill where it was like, when I'm ready,
suicide.
when if I'm ready, like I want to be able to like decide when is my time. Like this disease is not going to control me. And so I remember that they told us like, you know, you have to come for a meeting, and I couldn't go with her because I'm like, I'm not strong enough. This is already really hard for me to sit there and listen, and I have to be okay with that, you know? And so it was really hard. But my mom, like I said, she was one of the strongest persons that I know. I admire her strength, because I'm like, I don't know how she did it. I can't even imagine. And then when she opted for hospice, even that, like, I remember that I was sitting with her at the hospice house, and she's like, I need you to call the funeral home. And I'm like, I can't, I can't do that. She's like, no, it's not. I'm not asking you if you can do it. I'm telling you what I need you to do. And I'm like, Ma, like, I can't, like, I just can't, because to me, what that meant, it was the next time that I make this phone call, it's going to be because I have to call them so they can come. And I don't think I was ready for it. And she's like, you're never going to be ready. You're never going to be ready, but it has to happen. And I need you to do this for me. And I remember she was holding my hand, and I called and I talked to someone, and I just, you know, they gave me all the information, and I was like, okay, thank you. And then, yeah, once we hung up, she's like, yeah, ves, it's not that hard. And I'm like, you don't understand. Like, this is really hard for me. I'm losing my best friend. And that's why I feel like she battled with it for 7 years because she was my guide, you know? She was preparing me for when I was going to lose her. And I also feel like she was also preparing us to be strong for when my dad left, because my dad was not as strong as she was. My dad didn't accept the fact that his time was up. And so we had to be there by his side to help him navigate that, right? And I don't think I would have been able to do it if I had not experienced that with my mom by her helping me navigate it, right? And so once my mom passed away, um, it was one of those things where there was so much peace. I remember that I was in the room with her. My mom was in hospice, and then from hospice, um, there was moments where it was up and down, and then it wasn't until May where at this point she was getting sicker and sicker. And so we had called my aunt in Mexico, and they came and they were here. And so they were spending time with us, and my mom's like, "Oh, quiero que me hagan albóndigas for to eat." And so we're like, "Okay." And so we cooked, and then she just went into this deep sleep. And we're like, "She's not waking up, you know? So what do we do?" So we call the hospice line, and then they send someone. They're like, "It looks like she's transitioning." And we're like, "What does this mean?" You know? And so then they're like, her body's getting ready to die, basically. And so I was like, "Oh my God, like how?" She was just okay. Like I didn't
Mhm.
understand. And so that was like a process of understanding what happens to the body. Everything that we experience in the process of her body going was so hard. I think it's one of the hardest things. That was in May, and she wakes up, and it's May 10, and she wakes up like she has this rush of energy, and she wakes up and she's talking to us. I remember I had walked into the kitchen, and my aunt was there, and it was Mother's Day, and even though it was one of the situations that we didn't know how to handle, I still like told my aunt, like, well, happy Mother's Day. And I don't know if my mom heard it in her deep sleep, but she woke up, and we were all in the kitchen, and she was in our family room, and she said, "I'm really proud of the moms that you guys are," to me and to my sister.
Aw.
And we're like, "Oh my God, like she woke up, like this is not really happening, like it's not true. She's
Right.
now transitioning, and she got this burst of energy." And so then she's talking to us, and we were able to sit her up, and she's telling us, all these things that she wants us to do. And then all of a sudden she goes back into this deep sleep, and we're like, "Oh my God," And when she went back to that was the last time that we talked to her. When she went back to that deep sleep, she was like that until the 28th of May, when she passed away. And so then when she passed away, they had taken her to like the little hospice house. We would call it the little house because it was this tiny little house, and they would take the patients there for pain management. And so once she went into this deep sleep, we could tell that she was in pain. Like her facial expressions were in distress. Like she was so uncomfortable, and we could tell she was suffering. And so to us, it was like, it shouldn't be like this. We don't want her suffering. So we reached out to the hospice house, and we told them, like, "Is there any way you guys can give her more medicine? Like something's happening." And they ended up putting her like on an like ongoing pump to help with the medication. And anything that was happening, we were calling, and we were calling, because you feel helpless. You feel like, am I doing the right thing?
Mhm.
Am I not? There was times where I felt guilty because I would sit there and tell God, like, just take her. Just take her. I don't want her to suffer. And there was times where I'm like, "Oh my God, am I a bad daughter for asking God to take her?" But I just can't see her suffering. Like it's really hard to sit there and watch her suffer and know that I have to be okay knowing that she's leaving us and seeing my kids suffer for their grandma. Um, and so then they took her to the little house, and they were doing pain management. And then we were there, but she was only there for a day because the next morning everybody had left and it was just me that night. It was the 27th and I was just there and I was in the room and it was like almost midnight and I remember I called my husband. I was like, "Can you come? Like I feel like really unease. I feel like so uncomfortable. Like I don't know what's happening. Like I don't know if I could sense it or if it just felt different." And my husband ended up showing up and it was like 5 in the morning. And it was one of those things where, because when she started transitioning, we were always looking at like her breathing, like, is she
Mhm.
breathing, you know? And I remember like her breathing changed and she was taking longer, deep breaths and stuff like that. And that's when we learned about like the death rattle and all these things that like, I'm like, oh my God, this is really hard, you know? And her breathing changed and then I just heard her take a deep breath and then her body just relaxed. And I looked at my husband and my husband looked at me. He's like, it happened. And I'm like, yeah. And I felt so much peace because I felt like her suffering was done.
Yeah.
And I think that was the hardest thing. I'm like, as a daughter, to watch her suffer, battle cancer for 7 years and then suffer for the last couple of months was so hard to watch because I felt so helpless. There was times where I was so angry because there was nothing that I can do to make her feel better, right? There was nothing that I could say. And then there was times where I was so angry at myself because I feel like I wasn't doing anything or I was questioning everything that I was doing. Or is this the right thing? Or I should have done this, or maybe we shouldn't have done that, or this happened for so many things. And it was just really, really hard, you know? And so when it happened, like I said, I felt a lot of peace in the room in general. I think I was just like, oh my God, like she's really gone. And a sense of relief came, not because we were taking care of her, because somebody did try to say like, oh, I don't want it to be like she's a burden. I was like, don't ever say that. You know, if I knew that my mom wasn't suffering and I had to take care of her, I would do it at
Mhm.
100%. I just couldn't see her suffer. When you love someone, you can't be selfish. And that's when I had to learn, like, I need to accept the fact that she's gone, that her suffering is no longer here, and that she's at peace. And that we were there every breath that she took until her last breath. We were there, we were by her side. And that brought me so much peace. Yeah, of course, I miss her every single day. There's not a day that I don't miss her. But I can't be selfish, you know, because I love her enough to let her go. And I think that's one of the things where it's my motivation to keep going, like, because I've loved her, because I needed her to be at peace. I needed her to go, you know, and I think that's one of the things that you can do when you lose someone. Sometimes we try to hold on until like we don't want to feel the pain and we're like, no, we don't want to let go. And it's like, no, when you love someone, that's the biggest gift that you can give them. You need to let go of them because they only know they're suffering, you know, they only know what they're going through. And it's really hard. And I can't imagine what was going through her mind knowing that her whole life is being slowly taken away and there's nothing that she can do or that she can do different to hold on to, you know? And I think that's one of the things where it was just hard to watch as a daughter, to know that there's nothing that you can do to make it better or to minimize anything, you know? I think that was really hard.
Yeah, that's so hard. But I'm sure, I mean, even you and your sister, your family just showing up for her, that was probably like so beautiful, because I know that like being an adult, it's like having to, you being a mom and having your career and your husband, it's like, we would love to say that, yeah, we'll drop everything to be there for our parents. But, the reality is that, sometimes it's really hard, right?
Hmm.
Everyone has a
Yeah.
life, especially when you get older. So the fact that you were able to do that for her,
Yeah.
like, I'm sure she really like felt that love, that you
Yeah.
were by her side.
No, it was really a blessing that we were all able to be there with her and to be there by her side and to just be there next to her, you know, when she was like the most vulnerable. And also because it was really hard. I needed to be there for my kids because it was really hard to see how your body changes. I it's one of those things where I feel like I have so much pain from watching how the mom that I knew to the mom where I
Yeah.
lost her, right? Like
Yeah.
physically, everything that changed. And I think one of the hardest parts, when we lost her was, when I was sitting there in the room and I called my sister and I'm like, it happened, and then my sister came and we were both in the room and it was just me and her. And then we had to call the funeral home and the funeral home came and then like, okay, we're going to transport her. And they're like, you guys can walk out. And me and my sister were like, we're going to stay. We're going to stay because we want to make sure that we're there till the end.
Mm-hmm.
And there's times where I'm like, that scarred me because we had to sit there and watch our mom be taken away in a bag, and it wasn't easy, but I also feel like I don't think I could have done it any other way because I feel like I needed to be there every step of the way. I feel like my duty as a daughter was to be there.
So how long after your mom passed away did you lose your dad?
My dad, so after my mom passed away, it was COVID. And then COVID happened and that was crazy. And so my dad ended up coming to live with us. And my dad had always struggled with like health issues. He was diabetic, he had glaucoma, he had high blood pressure, so kidney dysfunction, so many things. But his health started declining more and more. And so then my dad was living with us for a period of time, like pretty much all of COVID. And then once he went back to his place, because my dad was very stubborn. My mom was 57 when she passed away, and my dad was 87 when he passed away. So there was a big age difference in my
Okay.
dad. And so my dad was very stubborn. So sometimes we would bump heads a lot.
Mm-hmm.
And he was stuck in his old ways and he was very stubborn and very entitled. At the same way, like I didn't blame him because I feel like my mom enabled him to be that way. He was very like, if he said that he needed something, he wanted us to drop everything and do it right there for him, And so when he was with us and when he was living with us, there was a lot of like friction because of that, And so then it came to the point where I was like, I think you're ready to go to your space. I think you need to go back to your house. And so he ended up moving back to his place. And when he moved back to his place, like his health just started declining more and more and more. And he ended up having to have a gallbladder surgery. But then the gallbladder surgery ended up getting complications. And because he was diabetic and things started getting complicated, his wound wasn't healing. Then he developed an infection. And so then they just told us, like, he has so many complications. He has so many health issues. He's constantly back at the hospital. Like, you guys consider palliative care or hospice, because at this point his health is just declining. It's like one thing after another,
Yeah.
right? Typically for someone that's healthy, you go get your gallbladder and it's like an easy thing. But for him, it was just complication after complication. And so my dad ended up passing away in 2023 and it was the same thing. Like, we went through hospice. He was in and out the hospital for a couple months. And through the process in the hospital, me and my sister were the ones primary caregivers. We were there at the hospital day and night. We would rotate. My sister would be there during the day. I would get there in the evening. I would sleep there. My sister would get there. And then finally, when we talked to him about hospice, it was hard a conversation to have because my dad didn't accept it. My dad didn't understand. I think he was so afraid of, even though he wouldn't say it, he was afraid of it. I don't think he understood and he didn't do well with the idea of like his body was dying, And so my dad put up a struggle. If he wouldn't want to take medication, he would spit the medication to us. Then we started seeing that he started having signs of like dementia. And so it was really, really hard. And again, I think if we had not experienced what we did with my mom, I think it would have been really hard with my dad. But because we had experienced it with my mom, me and my sister were, I think, in some way prepared and we were able to help him navigate certain things in a different way. Um, and then go through the process. And again, that process was also hard. He went into hospice. I think the hardest part in this situation was that there was two other children involved, right? Because with my mom, it was just me and my sister. In my dad's case, he had two other kids. And so when we had to have the conversation with his kids, it was different, right? Like there was a lot of things that were not on board with, or that they didn't agree with us, or they felt like we were exaggerating. And there was times where me and my sister were like, we're the ones that are here. We're the ones that are seeing it firsthand. We're the ones that are witnessing. Yeah, you come for 5 minutes and you see him eat and you feel like he's doing great because that's all you saw, but you didn't see the terrible night that he had prior to that. So I think it was just like making sure that me and my sister were on the same page. And at the end of the day, I feel like even though my dad, sometimes he had a hard time with accepting certain things. And in my dad's mind, he also felt like his sons, well, mainly one of my brother, my dad tend to praise one of my brothers more. And sometimes me and my sister would get hurt by it because we're like, we're doing all these things for you. And yet this person is doing nothing for you and you're still so stuck on it. And it wasn't until my dad was really sick that he realized it, and he apologized to me and my sister. And he told my sister, like, you're going to be the decision maker. I don't want any of them to take any decision. I want it to be you. And then at that point, me and my sister were on the same page, and we're like, we're going to do whatever he wants. And we are both on to be in the same page. And we came to the terms to like, okay, as long as we're on the same page, we're going to tune out everything else, because we heard so many things that were just very hurtful from a lot of people. Things as like, especially my sister. My sister was really hurt. They told her something of like, you're basically putting him down like a dog.
Oh my God.
Because we opted for hospice.
Yeah.
And and me and my sister, I think people sometimes don't realize what sometimes those words can do.
Yeah.
When it's not true. We love our parents. And again, if we could know that our parents are going to be okay and all we have to do is take care of them in a heartbeat, I wouldn't have no problem. But my parents were suffering, both of them, in different ways. And we were front row seat watching their suffering happen. In my dad's case, my dad had a wound in his stomach, and it was really hard to we were cleaning his wound. We were taking care of it. We were making sure that he was okay.
So he would ask you, like, am I going to be okay?
And that was really hard for me to know, like, what do I say?
He's scared.
He's scared. And that's when I realized I have to be honest. I can't lie, And I remember I talked to the nurse, one of the hospice nurses, and I told her, I'm like, my dad's having a really hard time. He thinks that he's going to be okay, like that he's going to get better. And she's like, I know, like he's brought it up. He said it to me too. And I'm like, I can't lie to him. Like, I don't think I could sit here and be like, yeah, you're going to be okay. Because I don't think I could be at peace with myself, And that was a hard conversation that I had to talk to my dad about. I was like, your body's not responding the way that it should. Things are happening to your body. And while we want you to be okay, we don't know. We don't know what that may look like, And so it was really hard knowing like that he didn't accept it.
Yeah.
And that he was fighting it.
He wasn't ready.
That he wasn't ready. And for me and my sister, I think it was really hard because there was times where we would question, are we doing the right thing?
Yeah.
Like, yeah, we said yes, but are we really doing the right thing? Because he doesn't accept it. And then hearing things like you're trying to put him down as a dog, it was kind of like hurtful, because instead of like being supportive of like, yeah, you might not have to agree with what we're doing, but we're being okay with what decision we're going with, but you could be there to support us as just a hand.
Yeah.
Hey, like here, we're here for you, But nobody was. And so I think for me and my sister, it just made our relationship stronger and just brought us closer. And again, like death is something that it may be different for everybody else. In our case, we got to experience it in every stage, from the moment my parents became ill to the point where it was like they were in and out the hospital, to the point where their body's transitioning, to the point where they're no longer here. So I think we got to see the full cycle of life. And for us, it's like, nobody deserved to suffer, you
Yeah.
know? And while it was a blessing to be there by their side and hold their hand until the last moment, it was also very difficult. But I feel like just like our parents were there when we first took our breath, we were there when they took their last. And I also feel like it was a moment for my kids to ex- to see this. This is what you do for someone you love. You're there even in their hardest times, in their most vulnerable moments. This is how you show up for someone. Even though like there was times where I feel like there's nothing that I can do to make them feel better. There was things that I was doing, and deep down inside of me, I knew that it wasn't going to change the outcome or make it better, but it helped me feel like I was doing something right.
Yeah.
You know, like there was times where I would sit there and massage their feet because they would say like, I'm in so much pain. And I knew that the pain wasn't necessarily because of their feet. I knew that there was other things that were happening, but to me it was like, well, I don't feel like I'm not doing something right. I feel like I'm being
Yeah.
helpful in some way. And so I think there was a lot of lessons to be learned, and to grow from through those experiences, even though they were very, very difficult.
So how do you deal with your new life now? Like now that you don't have your parents and that your kids are, I think we had talked about your kids are kind of more independent now that they don't need you around 24/7, right? Because they're a little bit older. How old is your youngest?
My youngest is, my daughter is 13. She's going on
13. So
14.
yeah, so she feels probably like she's an adult now.
Yeah, she's at that stage where she's more independent. She's doing things on their own. And it was hard. It was very, very hard. And I think it was really hard at this stage of like empty nesting because number one, my kids were my identity, right? Because I was a teen mom. But also, I think it came from being a caregiver, right? Like I was always caregiving, like for my mom, for my dad. So now that my kids are more independent, last year I struggled with it. I didn't know what was happening. I was upset. I was just like, what is going on? Like I didn't understand it. And it was part of it is like, well, I got to figure how to navigate life. I got to figure myself out of this role of being a caregiver, being a mom. Like, who am I? Who is
Yeah.
Heidi, right? As a person, as a woman. And I think that's where I felt like, well, I need to feel like I'm doing something for myself. How am I growing? You know, because I feel like for the longest time, I was just like functioning in like go, go, go because I was a mom, because I had to do
Yeah,
things
like
for my
survival
kids.
mode.
Yeah.
Like,
And then it was like I was caregiving for my parents, and it was like doctor's appointments and things and all different things. But then I never really had time for myself. So now when I started having this time for myself where my weekends were very quiet is when I was struggling, because I was like, I would be so into my grief and be angry of like, why am I in this situation, you know? And then I was like, now my kids don't even want me. There's nothing that I'm gonna do for my kids. My kids are due. And part of me was happy that they were independent, right? Because that's how I raised them, to be independent. But then I was like, they don't need me anymore. What am I gonna do? So I was struggling. And so I think some of the things that have helped me have been my husband, therapy, talking to my sister not so long ago when I was like having like a meltdown. Um, my sister booked a trip for us, and we went to like New York and Washington. She's like, I think you just need time away from everybody. And she booked the girls
how
trip
fun.
with my sister. It was my sister, my niece, and my daughter. And she's like, I just think you need time away from everybody because you're so always trying to do everything for everybody. And so now you're at this stage in your life where you have to let go a little bit. And I think that's where I am now, where I'm learning to set those boundaries of like, I'm going to let go. And it's okay to not be in control, right? Like things are going to happen whether I'm in control or not, right? And I can't sit here and think of like the worst is going to happen when I don't know what's going to happen in the next 2 minutes, right?
Yeah.
And I think switching that mindset and allowing allowing me to like not feel like I have to carry all this pressure and all this weight. And I think it comes from, like I said earlier, you know, communicating that to my husband, setting those boundaries with my kids. You know, one of the things that I've learned to do now, it was especially with my middle child. He is so entitled, this kid, but he can have a really hard time with time management, you know? I was late earlier because I was running around with his backpack. And so setting boundaries for them, like I told them, like, sometimes you guys don't realize you put so much stress on me
Yeah.
because it's things that belong to you, and then you give it to me because you're so used to me solving everything.
Yeah.
And I run around with all this baggage of like trying to be the problem solver. It's almost like I have all these files and I'm like, okay, what's next? What's next? And I had to have a conversation, and I just set up those boundaries. Like, I'm sorry that this is happening. However, you should have been prepared.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that's how I also set up those boundaries for myself, and to make sure that they understand what you're also growing up. Because I love you, I also need to make sure that you're successful as an adult. And I'm sorry, but life doesn't happen like that. Your mom's not going to be there all the time to help you get out of things that you need to do, or fix it for you, or your time management. These are all skills that in some way I was enabling, because I was always like, okay, I got it. I'm going to take care of it, or I'll be there, And I think one of the things that I'm learning now is like, I have to let go. And I'm sorry that you feel this way, but I'm not going to allow your stress to be put on me. And I think saying no. Also, I was always a yes person. Anybody that would come to me, they would tell me, so I'll take care of it.
Yeah.
I'll do it. Oh, we need some. I'll do it. And in my mind, I was already stressed out because I had already said yes. Because I'm like, how am I going to do this? How am I going to figure this out? And so I'm like, no, now I'm okay with saying no, and I don't carry it. Like, I don't feel guilty about it, And I had to do that for myself, because I'm like, no, like, my time is valuable. Like, now I have to run on your time. And what about me? I'm creating all this unnecessary stress for myself. So I said, no, not anymore. So one of the things that I said I've been working is just setting boundaries all across the board for my kids, for myself, for my husband, for those people around me. And then just making sure that there's expectations there that they're made aware of, right? The expectation is X, Y, and Z, and I'm verbalizing it.
Yeah.
And also, these boundaries are there for this reason. And I'm sorry that you're dealing with this, but I'm not going to carry this on for you. And I think that has definitely helped me through these last couple of months in my growth, and just letting go of things and being able to, like, okay, well, I'm not going to run with all this stress, with all this anxiety about things that are not even related to me, but I'm choosing to carry on because I want to solve it for someone else, So I think that's one of the things that I have worked on. And I have noticed that I sleep better because I'm not so stressed. But I also feel like I'm more comfortable with myself, and I'm not at edge. And I feel like before I was always on edge because I was like, oh my God, I need to run around and do
built
this.
like resentment. Towards
and
because
like you
say yes even though you can't, but then you're resentful towards the person because you're I can't. I'm only one person.
Well, and I think that's what ended up happening, especially with my kids. Like when my sister took me to that trip, is because I had a meltdown where I just lashed out at the kids.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, you guys don't value everything that you do, blah, blah, blah. And my sister's like, whoa, I've never seen you like this. I don't think I've ever verbalized this to the kids, And I think it's just because I was always doing everything for them. And I was like, I feel unappreciated. I feel like, yes, I'm also feeling the part that you guys are growing and you're being more independent and I'm letting you go. That's really hard, that I'm struggling with. But I also don't think that you guys appreciate everything that I do for you. And yes, they appreciate it. But I think sometimes they feel like it's a given, right?
Yeah.
They don't see like, you know what? Like my mom is going the extra mile. They just see me as like, my mom does it all. And it's not a superpower. You guys have to realize, like, I do this because I love you, but it's also important because you love someone. I also have to make sure that you guys understand that I'm not always going to be there. And so I think it's just setting those boundaries with them too.
Yeah, that's so beautiful. Thank you for sharing that.
Thank you for listening to the first part of Heidi's episode. Make sure you come back next episode to listen to how she started her business. Make sure to like, follow, and give us a 5-star review if you're liking the podcast. Also, check out our Instagram. We share behind-the-scenes photos and updates after every episode. If you're interested in being a guest, the link is in our captions and Instagram bio. New episodes drop every Monday. See you next week on Choices Were Made.